What if the most effective way to reduce your risk of cancer is not a medication, but something you do every single day? In the next few minutes, you are going to discover 5 science-backed habits that can genuinely change your health after 50. Hey, stop what you are doing right now, because what I am about to share with you may be the 4 most important minutes of health information you will hear this year. And I say that not to be dramatic, but because most doctors, including many oncologists, are still not telling their patients over 50 about this. Not because they don't know, but because it doesn't come in a pill bottle. I am Dr. William Lee, vascular biologist, cancer researcher, and author. I have spent more than 25 years studying what actually prevents cancer at the cellular level, not in theory, in published research, in clinical data, in the bodies of real people followed for decades. And what I have discovered, confirmed by a landmark 2022 study from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health that followed more than 116,000 adults for 28 years, is that a specific category of daily habits reduces the overall risk of cancer by up to 61% in adults over 50. 61%. That is not a supplement. That is not chemotherapy. That is lifestyle. And today I am going to break down the 5 most powerful components of that habit, ranked from helpful to absolutely transformational, so that by the end of this video, you will know exactly what to start doing tomorrow morning. I want to give you a preview of something right now, because the number 1 habit on this list is something that 90% of people over 60 are doing completely wrong, and the science suggests that fixing it alone can reduce your cancer risk by nearly half. So do not skip ahead, watch until the end, because the order matters. Each habit builds on the previous one. But before we begin, I want to ask you something personal. Leave a comment below telling me your age and whether you have ever had a doctor sit down and talk to you about cancer prevention, not just detection. I read every comment on this channel, and your answers genuinely shape what I cover next. Please take 10 seconds and share. Now let us begin, starting with number 5. Number 5 is something almost everyone dismisses as too simple to be serious, and that dismissal may be costing lives. I am talking about hydration, specifically drinking 16 to 20 ounces of filtered cold or room temperature water first thing in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything else. And I want to explain the biology precisely because this is not a generic wellness tip. There is a specific oncological mechanism at work here that the research has documented in ways that most people have never heard explained. Your body goes 7 to 8 hours every night without water. During sleep, you lose fluid through respiration and perspiration. You wake up in a state of mild to moderate dehydration every single morning, and dehydration has a direct and measurable effect on the concentration of toxins, metabolic waste products, and cellular debris in the bloodstream and in the lymphatic system. When the body is inadequately hydrated, the elimination of these compounds through the kidneys, the lymphatic system, and the digestive tract is impaired. The concentration of carcinogens and mutagens in the urine increases. The movement of immune cells through tissue is slowed, and the efficiency of the cellular repair mechanisms that identify and eliminate precancerous cells is reduced. But the mechanism I find most compelling from an oncological standpoint is the effect of adequate hydration on the colon. The colon is lined with epithelial cells that are among the fastest dividing cells in the body, replacing themselves every 3 to 5 days. This rapid division is what makes the colon highly sensitive to mutagenic compounds in the gut environment, and it is why colorectal cancer is one of the most common cancers in adults over 50. Adequate water intake dilutes the concentration of bile acids and other potential carcinogens in the colon, reduces their contact time with the colonic epithelium by promoting more efficient transit, and supports the mucus layer that physically separates the epithelial cells from the contents of the colon. A study published in Epidemiology found that adults who consumed more than 5 glasses of water daily had a significantly lower risk of colon cancer compared to those who consumed fewer than 2 glasses, even after controlling for all other dietary and lifestyle variables. And here's the detail that makes the morning timing specifically important. During the night, bile acids secreted by the liver accumulate in the colon. The longer they remain in contact with the colonic epithelium, the greater the potential for cellular irritation and DNA damage. Drinking 16 to 20 ounces of water immediately upon waking initiates peristalsis and promotes the movement of those accumulated compounds through and out of the colon, reducing the duration of contact between potential carcinogens and the epithelial cells they can damage. 16 to 20 ounces of filtered water every morning, before anything else. This is the foundation on which everything else I am going to tell you today is built. It costs nothing. It takes 30 seconds. And the cancer biology that justifies it is published and peer-reviewed. Now let us move to number 4. And this one is going to require me to challenge something that has been deeply misunderstood in popular health culture for the last decade. Number 4 is deliberate sun exposure, controlled, timed, and appropriate sun exposure, not tanning, not burning, but the specific type of morning sun exposure that drives vitamin D production and circadian rhythm regulation, two biological functions with direct and well-documented connections to cancer risk. Let me start with vitamin D because this is the mechanism that has the most robust oncological evidence base. Vitamin D is not simply a nutrient for bone health. It is a steroid hormone that, when activated by sun exposure in the skin, binds to vitamin D receptors that are present in virtually every cell in the human body, including immune cells, stem cells, and epithelial cells throughout the digestive tract, the lung, the breast, and the prostate. When vitamin D receptors are adequately activated, they regulate the expression of more than 200 genes, many of which are directly involved in cell cycle regulation, apoptosis, differentiation, and immune surveillance. In other words, adequate vitamin D keeps the cellular machinery that prevents normal cells from becoming cancerous running at full capacity. Vitamin D deficiency is one of the most consistent risk factors for cancer that has emerged from epidemiological research over the past 2 decades. A meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that pooled data from 63 observational studies found that higher circulating levels of 25-hydroxyvitamin D were associated with significantly lower risk of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The associations were dose-dependent and biologically plausible, given the known mechanisms of vitamin D receptor signaling in cancer-relevant pathways. And here is the critical issue. An estimated 40 to 60% of adults over 50 in North America and Northern Europe are vitamin D insufficient, meaning their circulating levels are below the threshold at which the anti-cancer mechanisms of vitamin D receptor signaling are fully operative. This deficiency is driven by several converging factors in older adults: reduced time outdoors, increased use of sunscreen that blocks UVB radiation necessary for vitamin D synthesis, reduced efficiency of vitamin D synthesis in aging skin, reduced conversion of vitamin D to its active form in aging kidneys, and dietary intake that is almost universally insufficient to compensate for these deficiencies without sun exposure. The second mechanism through which morning sun exposure connects to cancer prevention is circadian rhythm regulation. Morning sunlight exposure, specifically the blue spectrum light of early morning sun, is the primary signal that sets the master clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. This master clock coordinates the timing of virtually every biological process in the body, including the circadian rhythms of immune function, hormone production, cellular repair, and the activity of the tumor suppressor systems that patrol for precancerous cells. When the circadian rhythm is well entrained by consistent morning light exposure, the tumor surveillance functions of the immune system operate at their scheduled peak efficiency during the nighttime hours when they are most active. When the circadian rhythm is disrupted, as it is in people with poor light hygiene, irregular sleep schedules, and inadequate morning light exposure, the timing of these tumor surveillance functions is thrown off and their effectiveness is reduced. The practical recommendation is 15 to 20 minutes of direct morning sun exposure on the arms and legs, ideally between 8 and 10 in the morning when the UVB index is rising but not yet at its peak, without sunscreen during this brief exposure window. After this exposure, if you're going to be in the sun for an extended period, sunscreen is appropriate. But for this specific 15 to 20 minute morning window, the goal is vitamin D synthesis and circadian entrainment, both of which require direct UV exposure. If you live at a latitude where adequate UVB is not available for significant portions of the year, vitamin D supplementation at a dose of 2,000 to 4,000 IU daily, discussed with your physician, is the alternative. But nothing fully replicates the circadian benefits of actual morning light exposure, which operates through mechanisms that go beyond vitamin D and that require real outdoor light rather than artificial indoor lighting. Now let us move to number 3. And this one is where the research I have conducted throughout my career at the Angiogenesis Foundation intersects most directly with the daily habits that prevent cancer. Number 3 is the specific dietary pattern that starves precancerous lesions of their blood supply. And I want to explain this with the precision that the science deserves, because this is one of the most powerful and most underutilized strategies in cancer prevention that exists. In my research on angiogenesis, which is the process by which the body grows new blood vessels, I have spent decades studying how tumors co-opt this process to fuel their own growth. Here is what the research has established with extraordinary consistency. Every solid tumor in the human body begins as a microscopic cluster of abnormal cells that cannot grow beyond the size of a pinhead, approximately 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, without recruiting a new blood vessel to bring it oxygen and nutrients. This is the angiogenic switch, the moment at which a precancerous lesion transitions from a dormant, contained microscopic cluster to an actively growing blood-fed tumor. Before the angiogenic switch, these microscopic precancerous clusters are held in a state of dormancy by the natural balance between proangiogenic and anti-angiogenic signals in the surrounding tissue. The body produces its own anti-angiogenic compounds that keep these clusters contained. The research question that has driven my career is this: can we support and amplify the body's own anti-angiogenic defenses through diet, essentially making the tissue environment less hospitable to the angiogenic switch? The answer, based on hundreds of studies published over the past 3 decades, is definitively yes. And the dietary pattern that most consistently supports anti-angiogenic defense is rich in specific foods whose bioactive compounds have demonstrated anti-angiogenic activity at concentrations achievable through normal dietary consumption. The most potent dietary anti-angiogenic compounds identified in the research include EGCG from green tea, which inhibits VEGF receptor signaling, the primary pathway through which tumors recruit blood vessel growth; lycopene from cooked tomatoes, which has demonstrated anti-angiogenic effects in prostate tissue specifically; resveratrol and quercetin from dark grapes, berries, and apples; sulforaphane from cruciferous vegetables, particularly broccoli prepared in the specific way I have described in other videos; and the omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA from fatty fish, which reduce the production of proangiogenic prostaglandins in inflamed tissue. What these compounds have in common is that they support the body's natural tumor dormancy mechanisms by maintaining the balance of angiogenic signals in the tissue environment on the anti-angiogenic side of the equation. They are not chemotherapy. They do not kill cancer cells directly. They maintain the biological environment in which precancerous cells remain dormant and contained rather than switching to active, blood-fed growth. The practical implementation of this principle is straightforward. At least 2 servings of cruciferous vegetables per week, prepared correctly to preserve sulforaphane. Daily consumption of berries, specifically blueberries, strawberries, or blackberries, for their anthocyanin and ellagic acid content. Cooked tomatoes with olive oil 2 to 3 times per week for lycopene bioavailability. Green tea or matcha daily for EGCG. And fatty fish such as salmon, sardines, or mackerel 2 to 3 times per week for omega-3 fatty acids. This pattern, maintained consistently over years, creates a tissue environment that is measurably less receptive to the angiogenic switch that allows dormant precancerous clusters to become growing tumors. Number 2 is the habit that I mentioned at the beginning as the one most profoundly misunderstood by people over 60, and it is sleep. Not just any sleep, specifically the quality, duration, and timing of sleep as it relates to the tumor surveillance functions of the immune system and the cellular repair mechanisms that constitute your body's first line of defense against cancer. During deep sleep, specifically during the slow-wave sleep phases that are most concentrated in the first half of the night, 2 processes occur that are directly and powerfully anti-cancerogenic and that cannot occur with the same efficiency at any other time. The first is peak activity of natural killer cells, the immune cells whose primary function is to patrol the body and eliminate cells displaying markers of DNA damage or abnormal protein expression, exactly the cells that are in the earliest stages of malignant transformation. Natural killer cell activity follows a circadian rhythm with its peak during the nocturnal sleep hours. A landmark study published in the Journal of Experimental Medicine demonstrated that even a single night of sleep restriction, defined as 4 hours instead of the habitual 7 to 8, produced a 70% reduction in natural killer cell activity the following day. 70% from one night of inadequate sleep. The second process is the production of melatonin. And I want to be very clear here that I am not talking about melatonin simply as a sleep hormone. Melatonin is one of the most potent endogenous antioxidants the body produces, and it has direct anti-cancer mechanisms that have been studied extensively in oncological research. Melatonin inhibits the proliferation of cancer cells through multiple pathways, including the suppression of estrogen receptor activity in breast cancer cells, the inhibition of tumor angiogenesis, and the activation of apoptosis in cells with DNA damage. Its production occurs exclusively during darkness and during sleep, with peak production between midnight and 3 in the morning. Any light exposure during the night, including phone screens, television standby lights, or street lights through the window, suppresses melatonin production measurably. A comprehensive review published in Cancer Causes and Control that analyzed data from more than 15 studies found that night shift workers, whose melatonin production is chronically suppressed by exposure to light during the hours that should be dark, have significantly higher rates of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colorectal cancer compared to day workers, even after controlling for all other known risk factors. The World Health Organization classified night shift work involving circadian disruption as a probable human carcinogen, not the work itself. The disruption of the light-dark cycle that suppresses melatonin. This is the magnitude of the oncological relevance of sleep quality. The practical implementation for maximizing the cancer preventive benefit of sleep involves maintaining a consistent sleep window of 7 to 9 hours with a stable bedtime and wake time, sleeping in complete darkness with no light sources in the room, including screens and standby mode, maintaining the bedroom between 17 and 19 degrees Celsius to favor deep, slow-wave sleep, and eliminating blue light from screens for at least 45 minutes before sleep to allow the onset of melatonin production at its appropriate time. These are not suggestions for general wellness. They are specific interventions to restore the full nocturnal function of your immune surveillance system and your endogenous antioxidant defenses against cancer. And now we arrive at number 1, the habit at the top of this list. The one I told you at the beginning that 90% of people over 60 are doing completely wrong and that the science suggests can reduce cancer risk by nearly half when corrected. This is movement. But not just any movement, and not in any amount, and not at any time. The specific parameters of exercise that the Harvard 28-year study identified as the most powerfully cancer protective are the ones I want to give you with precision. The study found that the most cancer protective exercise pattern was consistent moderate intensity aerobic activity, specifically between 150 and 300 minutes per week, which translates to between 22 and 43 minutes per day, or between 30 and 60 minutes 5 days per week. Not extreme intensity, not marathon training, moderate intensity, defined as an effort level at which you can speak in short sentences but cannot sing comfortably. Brisk walking qualifies, swimming qualifies, cycling qualifies. The specific modality matters far less than the intensity and the consistency. Now here's the thing that 90% of people over 60 are doing wrong. They exercise at low intensity, at a pace and effort level that feels comfortable and sustainable, believing that any movement is equally beneficial from a cancer prevention standpoint. And while low-intensity movement is certainly better than sedentarism, the cancer prevention biology of moderate-intensity exercise is qualitatively different from that of low-intensity movement in ways that have enormous clinical significance. At moderate intensity, the working skeletal muscle produces and secretes a family of signaling molecules called myokines. Myokines are cytokines produced specifically by contracting muscle tissue, and they have a range of effects on cancer biology that are extraordinary and that most people have never heard about. The myokine IL-6, produced by contracting muscle, has direct anti-tumoral effects that are independent of its pro-inflammatory effects when produced by adipose tissue in a resting state. The myokine irisin has been shown in research published in Cell to inhibit the proliferation of breast cancer cells and to reduce the viability of cancer stem cells through direct molecular interactions. The myokine spark has demonstrated in multiple studies the ability to suppress colorectal cancer cell proliferation. And the myokine IL-15 promotes the differentiation and activation of natural killer cells and cytotoxic T lymphocytes, directly enhancing the very tumor surveillance functions of the immune system that sleep also supports. At low intensity, the production of these specific anti-cancer myokines is substantially lower than at moderate intensity. The research suggests that there is a threshold effect, a minimum intensity of muscle contraction below which the myokine secretory profile of the muscle does not produce the full anti-cancer signaling cascade that moderate intensity generates. This is why intensity matters, not just duration, not just frequency. The specific level of effort at which you exercise determines whether the myokine anti-cancer signaling is fully activated or only partially engaged. The second mechanism through which moderate intensity exercise prevents cancer is the reduction of circulating insulin and IGF-1. Insulin and insulin-like growth factor 1 are potent mitogenic signals, meaning they promote cell proliferation. When chronically elevated due to insulin resistance and sedentarism, they activate the PI3K ACT-mTOR signaling cascade in cells throughout the body, promoting cell survival and proliferation and suppressing apoptosis. These are the same pathways that are most frequently dysregulated in human cancers. Regular moderate intensity exercise improves insulin sensitivity, reduces circulating insulin and IGF-1, and by doing so reduces the mitogenic signal that these hormones provide to any cell with DNA damage that is in the process of malignant transformation. The third mechanism is the direct reduction of chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, the biological state that the research has identified as the primary environmental precondition for cancer initiation and progression. The myokine production of exercising muscle includes potent anti-inflammatory signals that counteract the pro-inflammatory cytokine environment driven by visceral adipose tissue, sedentarism, and the chronic stress of aging. Markers of systemic inflammation including C-reactive protein, IL-6 from adipose tissue, and TNF-alpha are consistently and significantly lower in adults who maintain regular moderate-intensity exercise compared to sedentary controls of equivalent age, weight, and health status. And lower systemic inflammation means a less hospitable tissue environment for the initiation, the promotion, and the progression of cancer. Now let me address the specific error that 90% of people over 60 make with their exercise routine because I want to be precise about what needs to change. The error is not that they are not moving. Many older adults walk regularly, do gentle yoga, or perform light activities around the home. The error is that they are never reaching the moderate intensity threshold at which the myokine anti-cancer signaling cascade is fully activated. They are moving at a pace that feels comfortable, that keeps them well within their comfort zone, and that does not challenge their cardiovascular system and their muscle tissue enough to trigger the specific biological responses that make exercise profoundly protective against cancer. The correction is straightforward. 4 to 5 days per week, you need to include at least 30 minutes of movement at an intensity where you are breathing noticeably harder than at rest, where you can hold a short conversation but would find it difficult to sing, and where you are generating enough muscular effort that you notice it in your legs and your breathing. Brisk walking rather than leisurely walking. Cycling at a pace that requires effort rather than a gentle coast. Swimming laps rather than water walking. The specific activity is not important. The intensity is everything. For older adults who have been sedentary, this target intensity should be built toward gradually over 2 to 4 weeks, beginning with what you can manage comfortably and progressively increasing the effort over time. And if you have any cardiovascular concerns, please discuss an exercise program with your physician before making significant changes in intensity. That is not a reason to avoid the intensity. It is a reason to do it with appropriate medical guidance. Now I want to bring all 5 habits together as a system because the 61% reduction in cancer risk documented in the Harvard study was not produced by any single habit in isolation. It was produced by the combination of all 5, implemented consistently over years, interacting with each other synergistically to create a comprehensive biological environment that is fundamentally hostile to cancer initiation, promotion, and progression. Morning hydration supports lymphatic clearance of toxins and cellular debris, reduces carcinogen contact time in the colon, and prepares the digestive system for optimal absorption of the anti-angiogenic compounds in the dietary pattern. Morning light exposure drives vitamin D synthesis and circadian entrainment, which directly supports the nocturnal tumor surveillance functions that deep dark sleep then maximizes. The dietary pattern rich in anti-angiogenic foods maintains the balance of angiogenic signals that keep precancerous clusters dormant, while also reducing the systemic inflammation that creates the tumor-permissive microenvironment. Sleep quality and duration ensure that the natural killer cell surveillance and melatonin production that constitute your most powerful internal anti-cancer defenses are operating at their biological maximum. And moderate intensity exercise activates the myokine signaling cascade that directly suppresses cancer cell proliferation, reduces the mitogenic hormones that drive cellular overgrowth, and further reduces systemic inflammation. Each habit reinforces the others. Exercise improves sleep quality. Sleep improves immune function. Adequate hydration improves the efficiency of every detoxification process that exercise and sleep are supporting. Morning light exposure regulates the circadian timing that coordinates when all of these processes peak. And the dietary pattern provides the bioactive compounds that amplify the anti-angiogenic and anti-inflammatory signals that the other habits are generating. This is not 5 independent interventions. It is one integrated biological strategy for creating a body that is systematically and consistently harder for cancer to develop in. I want to close with the thought that drives every piece of research I have published and every conversation I have had with patients and audiences over the past 25 years. Cancer is not a random event for most people. It is the result of decades of interaction between a genetic background and a biological environment. And the biological environment, in large measure, is what we create with our daily choices. The water we drink first thing in the morning sun we expose ourselves to or avoid, the foods we choose to eat or not eat, the quality and duration of the sleep we protect or sacrifice, and the intensity of the movement we challenge ourselves with or avoid. The Harvard study that followed 116,000 people for 28 years showed us clearly that the cumulative effect of getting these 5 things right consistently over years reduces the risk of the cancers that most commonly kill adults over 50 by 61%. Not 6, not 16, 61%. That number represents hundreds of thousands of cancers that could be prevented every year in people who already have all the tools they need, who simply have not been told how to use them. I am Dr. William Lee. If this video gave you something that could protect your health or the health of someone you love, please share it today. Subscribe to this channel if you want to continue receiving evidence-based medical information that goes beyond the standard advice. And leave me a comment below. Tell me your age. And tell me whether a doctor has ever talked to you about cancer prevention rather than just cancer detection, because that conversation matters. And if it has not happened yet, let this video be the beginning of it. Your biology is listening to every decision you make. Make sure what you are saying to it is worth hearing.